In this corner, standing at 6'5", weight class unknown, but hailing from the city of sin, put your hands together for Jamieson Welsh. And in this corner, standing at 5'10", weighing in at pounds, and coming to us from his super secret bunker with no AC in Tucson, Arizona, put your hands together for Luis Montemayor.
All right, welcome back to another edition of the Mixed Company Podcast. Of course, I'm one of your hosts, Jamieson, and as always, I'm joined by Luis. Luis, what's going on, man?
Jamieson, I am so happy to be back on the mic. Typically, we drop episodes every other Thursday, but last week we recorded a special bonus show to discuss our reactions after the Canelo Crawford mega fight. So go back and check that out if you missed it. We do talk a lot about, what the next thing is going to be for Bud and Canelo and what they're going to do going forward. So the episode is still very timely, even though the fight is now about almost 2 weeks away. But for today's episode, I want to start with a couple of shout outs, because last Saturday night was actually a night of some excellent boxing that flew under the radar. Shout out to Overtime Boxing. Jamieson, are you familiar with that platform or Overtime Sports in general?
Overtime, yes. The platform, yes. Not necessarily boxing, but the platform, absolutely.
Yeah, these guys, I've been following them on Instagram for a while. They promote their boxing showcases, live events. I finally got a chance to actually catch one. It's broadcast on DAZN, but it's also live streamed on YouTube for free and IG Live. So they showcase up and coming names. Their thing is they try to promote more exciting fights with innovative rules like smaller rings, so there's less room to dance around. They do KO bonuses, but the bonuses are higher in the first and the last rounds. So they sort of say, well, the fight can start strong and end strong. And there's actually an overtime round. So if the fight is a draw, they just have the guys go another round. So I want to talk about a couple of fights that I saw, but I just want to get your take on these rules. They're obviously very different than what we're used to. And, is that something that you think is innovative for boxing and good, or is it like you're destroying the integrity of the sport?
So here's the thing. We have to adapt. Like sports, every sport adapts. I mean, today, Major League Baseball put in a rule that you can challenge a ball or a strike. Every sport has some sort of updating, getting with the times, et cetera, et cetera. I don't necessarily mind it. Shortening the ring is interesting. I remember boxing, they had this like bare knuckle boxing a few years back, where guys wore like very thin gloves. Basically, it was like gloves to basically cover their knuckles. So there's always been something going on. There's always been some sort of, version of boxing that's coming in. I don't necessarily mind it. I like the KO bonuses. That's interesting. Just to make fighting, just another wrinkle. I don't mind it at all. I think that's actually, it doesn't hurt the integrity of the sport. I'll put it that way. I think, if anything, it adds more intrigue to things, if anything.
Sure. I'm not a purist on a lot of things. I mean, I don't think I've ever tried a pizza with pineapple on it, to be honest. I'm not against it. If you had one and wanted me to have a slice, I would, but I wouldn't buy it. But other things, I'm cool to try different things, and to make the sport livelier. And here's the thing. I watched 4 fights that night. They were all really exciting. They were names I hadn't really heard of, but they were all, and most of the fighters were like 20 fights or less, like 20 or less. So, not babies, but also, it was most importantly, it was in my hometown of Houston, which is awesome. Yep. And there were a bunch of Houston fighters there. And yeah, every fight, very good technical boxing, but also people were letting their hands go. Nobody was dilly-dallying. They were very aggressive, but also very just skilled. There was a women's match. There was an official WBC title fight. Tiara Brown held on to her featherweight belt. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's one of those where I'm like, I don't know why I haven't just gotten a chance to sit down and catch one of these events, because they're always advertising on Instagram. And, I think this was their 16th round. Like I said, backed by DAZN, the WBC, World Boxing Council, is an official partner. They sanctioned the new rules. They said they were cool with it, the ring size and the overtime round. So, they're legit. And I was just very, very impressed with the production, quality, no dilly-dallying between fights. Sponsored by a very popular national sandwich chain that I won't name unless they pay us. But you can tell the difference between overtime sponsored by them and major fights sponsored by DraftKings and whatever movie's coming out. So, but this is exactly what I think boxing needs more of is, again, those guys, and we've talked about it, those fighters that are, 10-0, 15-0. You don't know their names, but there's people to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I want is people to be encouraged to tune into a fight, even if it's random people you haven't heard of, and you might become a fan. And I'm going to tune into the next Overtime Boxing event for sure. So this is, I think, what's good for the sport is not everything has to be a mega fight,
No, I think there should be more boxing available because the casual people want to know people. They want to they want to follow along, but if there's not enough events to follow along, then they're not. You got to create the interest. You have to make sure that guys are active. And I think, especially if you don't have a name. If you don't have a name, you can't afford to be fighting once every 8 months. It don't work that way. It just doesn't. I think if you look on any fighter's Wikipedia and you look at their boxing you look at all their fights. In the beginning, you see how active they were. And this goes for pretty much any boxer. You go to Wikipedia and look at all their fights, go from the start to now or to retirement. They're so active in the beginning, it's unreal. And then you see it taper off for whatever reason. And it's very fascinating. But when you're coming up, you have to make a name for yourself. You have to fight often. You have to fight in random places. And that's how we get to know people.
For sure. That's something I kind of think is cool about, I love Tucson. I do. But it's not like a real city. Houston's a real city and places like that. So I feel like you can just go downtown on a random Saturday and, there's a legit boxing event, which is cool. So I don't miss living in Houston. I don't miss living in Texas. But stuff like that is just, there needs to be more of it. I think we lost some of it. And there's some conversations we can have later about, the sheen of boxing having been lost over the years. But one last thing about that event. For the main fight, the announcers were like, "Hey, we got a special guest here. Great fighter. So, such a guy, And I was like, "What? Like Joe from Joe's Mechanic? Like who do you have here in this event?" And it was Shakur Stevenson. Like she showed up to guest commentate. Yeah,
okay.
I was. Okay. I was actually impressed. I was very cynical. I was like, "What rando guy that his 3-0 and 1
right
did you get?" But no, Shakur showed up, and they talked about his upcoming fight with Teo. They talked a little bit about Canelo versus Crawford, and yeah, he just seemed to be having a good time.
So you know what? I'm gonna give Security some props. He really loves the sport of boxing. He really puts on and he really enjoys the sport. Whether we agree or disagree about his fighting style or his fight's boring or not, whatever. He is a good ambassador for the sport because he talks boxing and he understands a level-headedness about the sport. He's not a homer. He gives great analysis of what he says. It's not just says, "Oh, this person's the best because I said so." Nah, he breaks it down. And also, he is a likable guy. I think he can, if he cleans up the language a little bit, he can be really likable. But just in general, he's a likable guy. And that goes a long way when you're trying to gain new fans and make big fights. And I wish we had more of those types in our sport.
Yeah, he's likable. He loves boxing. He respects the history, but also say whatever you will about whether he's boring. He's a skilled and talented fighter. There's no question. Mm-hmm. Like you say that, he'd be better if he were more active or was less, whatever you want to say. You cannot tell me that kid is not, a very, very skilled elite fighter. So yeah, shout out to him.
Also, like, here's the thing too. He hasn't even approached his prime. Like, we're waiting on him to take the next step, become that ultra guy that is like, king of the castle, top of the food chain kind of guy. He has that kind of skill set. Now, does he have that kind of motor? Does he have that kind of mentality? We're going to find out sooner than later. But he has another notch or two he can go or get to, and I can't wait to see it if that comes about.
Absolutely. So shout out to him for giving Houston some love, Overtime Boxing some love. For all y'all out there, follow Overtime Boxing. They go by OTX. Follow them on Instagram and on YouTube. So like I said, I'm definitely going to be checking out their next event. So all right, another shout out goes to the late Ricky Hatton. He passed away the weekend of the 13th when the Canelo fight was happening. We mentioned it the last episode, but we didn't talk much about it. There's a lot going on, but British boxer, Hall of Famer, 45-3. 32 of those wins by KO. So now you had mentioned, I believe actually in our first episode, that his fight against Mayweather was one of the craziest things you've ever seen. So just really quickly, that I think sort of gets at the heart of what it's like watching boxing in mixed company. So
Yes.
if you don't mind repeating the story, Jamieson. So this was in 2007 in Vegas. Tell us the vibe of Mayweather versus Hatton.
So this was before. This was 07 or 08. I think it may have been 08. When was that fight?
I thought I saw 07, but don't,
because I want to say he fought. It may have been 08. I think it was the fall of 07 because he fought Oscar Cinco de Mayo of 07. So that fight was probably in the fall of 07. Just from
December 8, 2007.
Okay, yep. So, yeah. So the Brits and all of UK was here the whole week. They was drinking out bars. They was drinking, and they rolled deep everywhere. They were in the local bars. They were on the strip. They made their presence felt, and that was when you could go to any establishment and watch the fight. There was no $10 entry fee, $25 entry. There was none of that. This was back in the day. This was one of the last few ones where you could literally watch the fight at any establishment. So with that being said, all the places are going to be packed. Sports books, bars, etc. Well, the place I go to, which is a sports book bar at Red Rock, had people standing all over and sitting down. So it was all hell breaks loose. So as the fight goes on, and we know what happens in that fight, you have drunken Brits that are, upset that their man's getting tagged, and you got us and others celebrating because we know what's about to happen. And there was a bottle thrown at a bartender, and a bartender had to go to the hospital. And there were people arrested, and there was all kinds of stuff going on. But that was like the wildest night I've seen watching boxing. And again, that is the ultimate mixed company because that is Brits versus USA. That's white versus black. That's your guys getting beat up, and you pay a lot of money to get here. It's a lot of different things. And and it's funny because you had two mixed company mega fights that same year, which is very fun because Floyd and Oscar was a ultimate mixed company podcast, mixed company fight. And very fascinating stuff. But no, that fight, I didn't know how big boxing was in the UK until that happened. I've always heard about it. I know they fought in Wembley Stadium and all that. I didn't know until he came over here and the fans invaded Vegas like they did. I never knew until that. And now at that point, I was like, oh, this is different. This is way different.
So in that establishment you were in, was it like 50-50 black fans and British fans, or what would you say? How'd you break it down?
It was like 70-20 Brits versus USA. Like it was, they invaded it. And it's the local, this is not on the strip. This is not on the state line. This is in a local area where, residents go, and they invaded it. And it was a very interesting place. The cops got involved. People go to the hospital. It was nuts. I'll never forget it.
That I went back and rewatched the fight, and also the crowd chanting. It's like a football stadium, those British chants that we all know about. It was there. Actually, Ricky Hatton started off really strong. He was aggressive. He landed some clean shots. I think Mayweather was wobbled in like the first round. So it's very different from when you see a fight not really going your guys' way, and then as it goes on, you're just like, nothing. He can't pull it off. He can't pull it off. But I feel like that the vibe was like, we got you, Mayweather. We got you. Your ass is grass. And then the vibe just kind of went downhill for the British fans because, early on, there were several rounds that could have gone easily to Ricky, even for like a casual observer. But yeah.
And that's back when Floyd used to give away a couple rounds at first just to get the information downloaded and whatnot. And then from like round 4 on, he would just take over. So, yep.
Yeah, that was definitely what that fight was like. So, but shout out to the guy. Shout out to his fan base. They might have been aggro assholes, but they're passionate about the sport, and that's the great thing about boxing is you get passionate about your fighter. And we've said before, there's nothing like it. I've never ever felt I'm rooting for this NBA team or this NFL team, and they start losing. That feeling of watching your guy just slowly lose on points as the fight goes on, it's devastating. And it's just, man, it's I've never experienced anything like it with any other sport.
Correct.
So RIP Ricky Hatton. Shout out to British boxing fans, and shout out to the British for the British for drinking a lot.
They put it down. Hey, Luis, my guy, they make you look normal.
I went to London a few years ago, and they straight up said like, yeah, we just drink out on the street. They'll give you to-go cups. Like I always ask like, what's the vibe here? Public drinking. Some places are like, well, you're not supposed to, but we kind of the Brits were just like, man, you walk down the street just drinking a bottle of whiskey, just chugging that shit. They are not gonna nobody's gonna look at you sideways. They do not care. So went to a pub that was so packed and like it was so overflowed that they were just people in the alleyway, just groups of people hanging out, chatting with their drinks, and they're leaving like empty glasses on the sidewalk for the bartenders to pick up. I guess for the barbacks to come and get. They don't give a shit.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good time. Did not spend as much time in London as I would have liked. It was less than a week. I wanted to relax, so I'd spend a few days in London just to kind of do something different, and then to spend a week in Dublin, which is very, very chill.
Okay.
Yeah, the Irish also, also big fans of boxing. But yeah, shout out to them. Shout out to boxing being the greatest sport in the world. Every country in the world has a boxer, and every country has boxing fans. So this is why we do what we do. Let's move on to the news. So the boxing world was buzzing over the return of Manny Pacquiao in July. We said that after Manny looked great in that fight, after it ended in a draw, after he was ranked the number one contender in the WBC rankings, that there's no way he wasn't coming back for another fight. And you said our man was probably going to be back for 2 or 3 more. Easy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's rumors that he might fight 29-year-old Rolly Romero, last seen defeating Ryan Garcia in a major upset earlier this year. What do we think of this particular fight, his chances, the level of excitement? How you feeling?
As long as Pacquiao's preparing himself and is in shape, he's going to be all right. Like, I don't think Rolly's an interesting guy because Rolly is Rolly. Rolly makes the fight interesting, but Rolly is a guy. He's not a stopgap because that's not fair, but he's kind of like a journeyman with some talent. That's basically kind of the best way to describe him at this point in his career. He'll get in there, he'll make the fights fun, but we know eventually 9 times out of 10 he's probably going to lose to an opponent that's better than him. That's just how it goes. Pacquiao on the other end is interesting because if he can look okay, he's going to be fighting for a while. I mean, one, the way the economy is right now, I understand why somebody is able to get millions if you can get it. I understand that. That's just how it goes. How you want to slice it, whether you think it's good, bad, or indifferent, people won't get the bread. But secondly, if he's not disrespecting the sport and if he can actually box, I don't see a problem with it. And as long as he makes decent fights, he's going to keep fighting. I don't see anything to say otherwise. I think we're going to keep seeing these. And I'm not necessarily opposed to it. As long as he looks like he did last time, if not better, I think it's a good thing.
Sure. I mean, I said from the beginning when he was coming back, and sure, we might have rolled our eyes a little bit, but I always said he's fighting for a title. Like, it is a legit fight. It's not a fake little showcase. It's not Pacquiao versus Evander Holyfield for 5 rounds in a showcase for money. Respect to him for that. Definitely maybe not the best competition. Broly is a talented fighter, and I think he was that win against Ryan Garcia, fair and square. He did a great job. I don't think there was any controversy as to that decision there, but Manny is you said, I won't take your words. You said he would outsmart Rolly, and I agree 100%. Mm-hmm. Manny has the ring IQ. Rolly got beat by Tank, who also has excellent ring IQ. I think that was going to be the deciding factor. I think Tank beat Rolly. Rolly beat Garcia, who has lower ring IQ than most people. So
all the above.
I think Rolly learned from his loss to Tank. So.
Right. And quiet as kept. I'm glad you brought that one up. That wasn't a bad fight by Rolly. Rolly was actually in that fight more than people want to admit. Like, Rolly didn't fight a bad fight versus Tank. He just, we walked into one, but he wasn't fighting a bad fight at all.
No, I'm glad you said that, and that's something that I think we get caught up on in general. We're talking about this guy won decisively. We talked about Canelo Crawford. We kept talking about Bud's win and how great he looked. And last episode, you said it's not like Canelo embarrassed himself. He lost, and that's okay. We kind of lose sight of that. We always say, like, this guy won, and we just kind of, write off the loser, and we just kind of treat him like he slept to walk into the ring. But that's not the case. Rolly's talented. He met a guy that was better than him, and that's okay. Shit happens. Right. The question is, is he going to prepare for Manny? His skills, we saw him. He looked good. He did not look like prime Manny 20 years ago. But then again, nobody did 20 years ago. So, but yeah, I mean, my man is 46, maybe going to be 47 soon. So can he keep up with a 29-year-old Rolly Romero? That's kind of the question. I don't know that we have an answer, but
yeah, it's a good question. It's more about outsmarting him because you're not going to keep up with him activity wise. That's not going to happen. But outsmarting him is probably the best bet. Those are the things where you got to hope that he outsmarts him, and that's the interesting thing about that. However, what I will say is this: if Pacquiao is training at a good level and stays healthy, that means he's serious. He's not here just for the money. He's actually taking the craft seriously, and I can respect that. If he does that, Rolly's in trouble. Rolly's going to have to fight the best fight he's ever fought, and I don't know if he has that in him at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would have preferred a Tank or a Teofimo Lopez as competition. They're definitely guys who have a lot better on their feet, and definitely probably could tire out an old man Manny. Because time is no joke, no matter what, no matter how good you are.
So a Tank Pacquiao fight does big numbers. I don't think it does a football stadium, but it definitely sells out wherever it's at. It would do big numbers. I think Tank would, he would hurt Pacquiao, but it would be big. It would do big numbers just based off of name and everything going on. However, I'm glad you brought up Tank. I know you've seen the shenanigans with this fight he's coming up with. It don't look like a guy's into boxing much longer. It looks like a guy that's kind of over it. And if that's the case, if this is what we've seen outside this fight that's coming up, he's had a hell of a career. And if he wants to call quits, God bless him. But it feels like a guy that is kind of like, I'm done with this. I don't sense a guy that say, I'm ready to fight in 26. It gives me the vibes of, hey, you know what? I was in boxing for all these years. I'm not feeling it no more. I'm going out my own way. If he wants to do that, then God bless him. But I'm getting those vibes.
I said it on the show. I said that I think Tank's going to dip after this fight with what's his name? I don't know. I'll look it up later. So there was I said, if he didn't lose that much cachet. Sure, the fight against Lamont Roach kind of exposed some weaknesses, but the interest in a rematch was there. The interest in a rematch was only there because there was no interest in the first one. The man could have still fought, a couple of elite opponents and still made maybe not as much money, but, he wouldn't have gone home with pennies. I do think that he's doing this as the last hurrah. And yeah, based on, his attitude at press conferences, just the way he's saying he doesn't take it seriously. I think that he said, like, literally asked, like, when's the fight again? And I don't think he was joking. I don't think he was joking.
I don't think so either. I think he's here for the money. And everyone has a price. Everyone has a price. We've seen it in sports. We've seen it in everything. Everyone has a price. I don't know how much he's making. I've seen a bunch of unconfirmed reports, but if he's making anywhere more than $50 million, and if he has financial people around him that can make that 50 last for a lifetime, I can't be mad at him as a person. As a boxing fan, I'm kind of disappointed, but that's just selfishly as a fan. But as a person, if somebody's going to give you 50 plus or $100 million, then hey, do what you got to do.
Well, for my part, I already said what I think of Tank Davis is that he is dead to me. I said it before that if he took this fight with the Paul Clown, like, I'm out, my man. That is disrespectful to your legacy. That is disrespectful to the sport. And so I hope he dips. I enjoy your cash, and then we'll see you in 15 years when you're broke like Manny Pacquiao.
What is his legacy if he retires after this? What is his boxing legacy?
I think legacy. How about this? Legacy is bottom heavy. Like, the way you go out, people have recency bias. They're gonna remember what they last saw you. They're gonna see him as a guy who should have lost that Roach fight. They're gonna see him as a guy who fought an unserious fake boxer or wannabe boxer. Sorry, and I think that's what people are gonna remember. And also Tank, he's one of the faces of the sport, etc. But he's not a big name like Canelo is, like Mayweather was. Right. We are going to remember, the best of times. But I think he's going to walk out of here just kind of with his tail between his legs. In the way, sorry, people are going to see him as walking out of the sport with his tail between his legs. In my opinion.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I think if he's because he said he was going to retire. I think he said at the beginning of this year, end of last year, that he was retiring soon.
Mm-hmm.
I think if he, regardless of that first Roach fight, things happen. I'm not going to hold that draw or that should have been loss against him, if that's what you think.
Mm-hmm.
I won't. But you got to take that damn rematch. You have to show up for the rematch, and you have to fight one, if not two more big names, a tail fight, like an elite name, and walk out, with your head held high. Damn it. I think this is really gonna just kind of hurt the image of what Tank Davis was in people's eyes, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I didn't want it to be this way, Jamieson. And
no, it's not me. Hey, we're all in the same boat, man. We wanted to see the thing about boxing that makes it so dope is we've seen a lot of these careers from when they were fighting on undercards before we heard them as like we heard them through somebody else that they were underground and they're up and comers and all this to see them rise. That's the beautiful thing about boxing. So all the great fighters that we've seen over the last 25 years, I remember them coming up on undercards. I remember hearing about them. Like I remember hearing about Bud Crawford. I remember hearing about Canelo Alvarez. I remember hearing about all these guys. I remember hearing about even. It got to the point where if you were on Golden Boy, if you're under that umbrella, we saw you on all the undercards. That's just what it was. They were actually one of the smartest promotion companies because they had all their up and comers fight on the big dog cards, and that's how we got to know them. But even back before social media got big, we heard people through the paper, through word of mouth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is something where it's tough because it's just not like that no more.
Mm-hmm. Well, and going back to Canelo and his, he lost to Bivol, he lost to Terrence Crawford, both in very, very clear fashion, but also, he wasn't sleepwalking, sure, maybe some of the competition wasn't elite, but, he's had his cachet look good. I don't think that if Canelo ends up dipping after 2026 and his re-out season fights, that it's going to be the same thing for Tank. I mean, yeah, he's going to get clowned for not taking the Bivol rematch and, get clowned for not fighting Benavidez, but again, I've always said that shouldn't have even been a consideration for him because he is a little guy that got beefy. I'll always go back to that. And it's not even a matter of skill set. It's a matter of, the kind of dude, if you're a little guy, it's always going to be trouble fighting a big guy. David Benavidez is a big guy, period.
Right.
So I think it's more, comparing that to Tank Davis, it's just the way God damn it! You saw the picture. Like my man is 5'5", and Jake Paul's like they say he's 6'1". I think he's 5'11". But it's ridiculous.
Even if he is, like people don't understand. They're looking at the height and the size and everything. If Tank hits that guy with a real left hook, this whole shit is over. This whole charade is over. All right, and you've boxed. You've been in the ring. I've talked with other boxers and people in boxing. The height and size, none of that shit matters. If you get hit like the way he hits. If you get hit with, you know what? Tank has power in both hands. So the left hook is always good to me. I like his left hook, but yeah, just in general. If Tank gets him with one of them, it's over. This whole shit is over. I don't think that's going to happen because I think this whole thing is weird, but whatever. But yeah, it's a sham. It's a sham. It's really a sham.
I'm not going to go full on and say, the fight is scripted or fixed or whatever. I'm not gonna say that. What I will say is that I think if you buy the ticket, ride the ride. If you're on a Jake Paul fight and you know that you're gonna make some money, what side your bread is buttered on. And I don't think you're gonna, I don't think people are. It is a smart business decision. Not to embarrass that man on his own, on his territory. It's his turf. So that's kind of what I see it. And you can say that like, well, whatever, still a legit fight. It's not fixed. That's fine. But there is something to be said about what we're really after for here. And here's another thing that pisses me off. We know that Tank has said he's all about the money. But you know how he's made a lot of money? Becoming an amazing elite fighter. Like he put in the work
that people want to see. That's the thing. Yes. If you can making money in boxing is what it is. Becoming a draw is a totally different conversation. He's one of the rare guys that became a draw in this era. That is very difficult to do. Now, with that being said, he's only been out to sell out black cities, Baltimore, Atlanta, DC. So his market is better in those places than others. However, with all that being said, he is a huge draw, and people have paid pay-per-view prices to watch him fight. Hell, the last fight, one of the fights he had, it was spring of 23, I believe. We bought it. It was a fight that we bought on pay-per-view. So those are the things where it's like, hey, man, that ain't for everybody. Not everybody gets $80 out of me. They just don't. So those are things that he's taking for granted, and it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, that spring of 23 fight was Ryan Garcia, actually.
There you go. That's what it was. Yep.
Yeah.
And the only reason I bought it is I had people over, and we had the playoffs on at the same time, and there was a lot going on. So I just said, forget it, I'll just buy the fight. And we were watching it, and it was like, dang, Tank is now that guy where you get people buying pay-per-views. It's very hard to do. Up until then, it was really just Canelo being the main guy that people regularly bought pay-per-views when he fought.
So I always mention the neighborhood sports bar here in Tucson where I go to watch fights. There's actually two locations. There's one in the ghetto, which I say lovingly, and one downtown, which is more of a club feel, like it's upscale. I actually went to see the Tank and Garcia fight at the downtown one for the first time. I hadn't done that, and it was packed. And there was actually a lot of Tank fans. Sure, we're in Tucson, a lot of Mexicans here, so the crowd reaction for Ryan Garcia was definitely higher, louder. But there were a lot of people cheering for Tank. And then the great thing about it is when Tank knocked Ryan down, there was no booing. There was no like fuck you or any of that. Everybody was just stoked. Like everybody was just blown away by, what just happened. People were like clapping and cheering, like banging the bar kind of a thing. It was just the excitement of the fight took over. And it wasn't like, oh, my guy's down. It's just like, oh, right. Shit. That was so exciting. But yeah, so that was a great night too. That was a fantastic time watching that fight out in mixed company. And there was a guy with a Tank Davis t-shirt, and I was like, they sell Tank Davis t-shirts? I want one. Cool. Well, man. All right, another bit of news here that I want to mention. After Terrence Bud Crawford defeated Canelo Alvarez at 168 pounds, I think the day after or something like that, Saudi promoter Turki Al-Sheikh wondered on Twitter if David Benavidez could still make 168. We remember that he went up to about 175 and was targeting that area. Benavidez straight up said, "Nah, man, I'm good." He said, "Let Bud Crawford, take 168. That's his weight class now. He dominates. I want to focus on 75 light heavyweight or even cruiserweight or go higher." What did I say? Benavidez is a big guy. That's probably where he's best suited. Yep. I don't know. I mean, do you think this is a smart thing? I mean, here's the thing. No shout out to Turki Al-Sheikh because that man said during the Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol fight, he said, "Yeah, let's do Benavidez with the winner of this one. Why not? Al Heyman, let's all get together and do this." He said that into a microphone in front of a damn camera. I heard it. And
he's then just trying to make fights. You gotta remember, his job is to make fights. He's just trying to whatever the biggest money thing that can be done, he's trying to do.
Yes, but then after the fight, after the fight, he said, "Nah, we're good. I'm not that interested in Benavidez versus Bivol." Like you just
there's an issue though. There's an issue because not everybody's talking to Turkey like that. There's been a handful of guys that aren't really interested in doing business with him for whatever reasons they have. Everybody's reasons are different. I'm not one to say someone's right or wrong. That's above my pay grade. Sure, yeah. I think there's a few boxers that have been like, you know what? I'm cool. I'm good. So I understand that. And everybody has their own ways of doing things because if you take that money, you got to do whatever they say. You can't do things in your own time. You can't move at the beat of your own drum. You got to follow their rules. You got to do what they say. If you got to promote the fight a certain way, then shit, you got to do that. If they have you fight in Saudi Arabia, then shit, you got to hop on that plane and fight in Saudi Arabia. That's just how it is. There's no way of getting around it. And not everybody is with that. Most people are because the money's big, but not everybody is.
Yeah, that's fair. whatever the reasons for, that fight happening or not happening, I think Turkey Al Sheikh was also ducking a Benavidez fight for different reasons, for financial reasons, whatever. Looking for bigger money on maybe a better BF trilogy, but that's neither here nor there. I think, the question is we've been talking about poor Benavidez, not really getting the respect he deserves. I think he made the right choice. I think him saying that he's not going to go back down to fight Bud, I think that's good. I think he should stick to the plan, be the bigger guy, sharpen his skills against other, large beefy dudes. He wants to fight Bivol. He wants to fight Zurdo Ramirez. He's fighting Anthony Yarde in November. So I think it's good for him. I feel like that man, I think, is going to be a star just by sheer force of will, because he's been grinding. He's been not getting his shot. The Ring magazine just put him on the cover, just like yesterday. You saw that on Instagram. So I feel like that man is just gonna get in your face and say, "You will respect me, damn it." And I hope that the fan base really does it, because he is a talented fighter who just kind of he's been written off, or not written off. He just hasn't been given the respect he deserves, I think, as a fighter. So
I agree.
Yeah, but pride of Phoenix boxing, David Benavidez. So I'm a fan. I remember when we went to see Canelo versus William Skull at the Neighborhood. I mentioned that Turkey Al Sheikh brought him and Crawford in the ring to face off. I was stoked. Guy next to me says, like, "Who you think is going to win?" I said, "Honestly, I don't know." I'm going back and forth. Right. He's like, "I'm going Crawford, man. I hate Canelo. I'm Crawford, and Bud and Benavidez are my guys. I hate Canelo." And I'm like, okay. Yeah, I was like, all right, I wasn't mad at that.
Right.
So I kind of hope that, no disrespect to Canelo and his legacy, but he's on his way out. He's not the guy anymore. I think the next big name in Mexican boxing should be David Benavidez, and I think the fans should show up for him, like to do for my boy Canelo.
Yep.
That's just my take on it. So anyway, and just another quick note. I don't have a lot to say on this right now because it is a ways away, but Shakur Stevenson and Teofimo Lopez appear to be fighting in January of 2026. As Shakur actually brought it up when he was a guest commentator over the weekend at Overtime Boxing. So all I really want to say is, like, finally an exciting matchup between these guys at that level. People just kept dancing around.
It takes two tango, man. You can only offer the contract so many times. You can only go back and forth so many times. I think it's going to be held in New York, I think. I
didn't hear either way. I wouldn't know.
Okay, got it. I want to say it's going to be in New York because I know Stevenson's from New Jersey. He's out there most of the time. But wherever it's at, as long as we get it. If we get it, that's going to be another mixed company another mixed company fight. Interesting fight. Very interesting. That's basically the one that's going to separate who's who, because both guys have big brands and big names, and that's a very fun fight. So yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, Teo's from Brooklyn, or from New York. I think he's from Brooklyn. So, and his people, his folks come out. New York Puerto Ricans. They came out, and so people from Jersey coming out for Shakur. It's not a long ways to travel. So I think that's going to be, even if there's not a lot of people that know these two guys super well, I think the hype is going to be, as we get closer, I think it's going to get some more eyeballs on it. I think just the excitement for the fight, and this is my prediction, 4 months away or whatever, where we're at. I think that fight is going to get a lot of buzz. And
if you put that fight in Brooklyn or in the Garden, it does numbers. It's a huge buzz. Mm-hmm. It's in January, which is perfect. I like it a lot. I like it a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. And, let's just hope that that's a good way to start 2026 when it comes to the boxing game. So,
yep.
All right, let's move on to our recurring segment called Pop Pugilism, where we discuss a movie, TV show, or documentary about boxing. Today, we're getting a little loose with it, admittedly. We're talking about a movie that is not about boxing, but the sport features very heavily in the plot. It was my idea just because I thought it'd be fun to talk about, and I have a lot to say about boxing in the 90s, but we are talking about Snake Eyes from 1998, directed by Brian De Palma. I got a DVD. I have the 4K UHD, Jamieson. Show some respect.
You have problems. But
standard def DVD? Are you kidding me?
Wow, you were wild.
4K from Kino Lorber just released recently. So I saw this movie when I was a kid. I didn't remember much about it or even if I liked it or not. I remembered boxing was involved, and I figured once I gave the disc a spin, I was like, hey, I also was like, well, it's on sale, even if it's not that great. Whatever. I support physical media. It's going to look good. I have a giant TV.
You forced me to watch a Nick Cage movie. All right, man. It is what it is. It is what it is. I'm not going to hold it against you. But it was boxing's been a part of a lot of movies, come back to think of it. Even the first Ocean's 11. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so when I was watching, that's what it kind of felt like. It gave those kind of vibes away. So, that's boxing in the 90s. So we were both young in the 90s, obviously, but boxing in the 90s was way different. The vibe, we didn't have social media, which was probably a good thing because it feels like with social media, boxing and everything has lost some of its luster. It just doesn't feel the same because people are there, people were around the city, et cetera, et cetera. When all we had was newspapers and local news and Sports Center and whatnot, it felt like a huge event because you didn't know all the stuff. You didn't know anything. We didn't have access to all these people who would be there. We didn't have TikTok that would have all these people going to fights. We didn't have any of that stuff. So the event was so much more because you had to pay attention to it. There was no other way of finding out regarding it. So yeah, man, it was interesting.
Yeah, like I said, this movie came out in 98. You and I are the same age. We were both born in 86. And back then, watching this movie as a kid, it didn't even strike me. It didn't even faze me that this entire movie took place during a boxing match in a boxing arena. Nowadays, I'm like, that wouldn't happen. It's a crime thriller. An assassination occurs the night of a boxing match of Secretary of Defense. I don't see, a movie these days having a talk thriller, crime thriller or an action movie involving boxing at all. These days, if there's a movie around boxing, it's about a fighter. It really made me feel just like how everybody knew about boxing, about fights. And this might be me as a kid, misjudging it. That's just kind of how I felt. We also grew up very differently. I'm from a Mexican family. I can't tell you when I learned what the Super Bowl was, honestly.
I got you.
Yeah. But I always knew, that mega fights happened, that Julio Cesar Chavez and De La Hoya was fighting. Like that was just a part of my childhood.
I knew both. Oh, my bad. Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off. My bad.
No, I was just going to say that this really harkened back to a time that watching the movie kind of made me realize just how differently my brain works now with boxing and how differently the world sees it, the country sees it, hell, the fight was in Atlantic City. When's the last time that there was a mega fight in Atlantic City? My God.
It's funny you mention that because back then, back in the 80s and early 90s, that was the spot because, Trump owned them hotels and he had a lot of fights there. Tyson fought there a lot. All people from New York and Philly and all that would always drive over there. So it was a thing. However, those properties kind of went belly up and all the fights kind of came out this way. And that's just how it went. But now it was a thing in the 80s for sure. There was a lot of fights out there in the 80s and early 90s. But once Vegas took over, it just is what it was.
Yeah, that was one of those things that I knew but forgot when they said, and the fight in the movie is between a black guy and a Mexican guy, not for nothing, very much a mixed company fight. And when they said, it would take place in Atlantic City, my mind was blown. I was like, oh, right. That used to be the spot.
Yep.
But it's been so long that it was kind of like stepping back in a time machine. Another thing too that is very prominent in the movie is the sport is straight up portrayed as corrupt. Guys paid to take a dive. It's part of the assassination plot. We know boxing well. We know it's always been one of the most corrupt sports in the world. But I'm curious your take on, at that time in the 90s, was that the kind of vibe that the general public had? Did they see it as kind of a dirty money sport, or is that something that kind of came later?
Absolutely. No, it's always been there because there's always controversial decisions that took place, just like it does now. It's even the big fight that we just had. You can argue that some of the scorecards were wild. It's always been like that. And it's never going to change for a variety of reasons. But yeah, back then though, we only had a couple of media people. So if the three people covering the fight all said the same thing, then that's what it was. If all three people said, hey, something's not right, then we just took it for that and moved on. Now you got thousands of people with articles, podcasts, newspapers, etc., having different type of opinions about what took place. So you're not also keyed in on this conspiracy. But back in the day, when you had a main writer for your newspaper, maybe a main local news person, and then like a ESPN, CNN Sports, or Fox Sports covering it, then yeah, you're gonna get, if you get 5 opinions and they're all 5 the same, then that's just what it was.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, again, I keep going back to it, like stepping in a time machine. Yeah. Just it is so cool. You know, in the movie, the Secretary of Defense is at the fight, and I was like, that would make sense for the 90s. Like that, I wouldn't have batted an eye if I went, literally got in the time machine and went back, and they're saying like, oh, all these government officials, you know, at a major fight. That wouldn't be weird at all. What was interesting, it made me think of, was Canelo Crawford fight was on Netflix, and there was a ton of celebrities there, tons of celebrities. But part of me was also like, hey, are you there because you have a Netflix show and you got in?
You know what I mean? So that fight was interesting. They gave a lot of credentials away, and that was a lot of people, a lot of celeb. Because when you got a stadium that can fit 70,000, you can earmark 1,500 seats for celebs and famous people. It's a lot easier to do it in a 70,000 seat stadium than a 20,000 seat stadium. So way easier. So anyone that had ties to not just Netflix, but if you had a podcast or a movie, if you were any kind of celebrity, they brought you out around Wednesday or Thursday. You kind of did their radio row, and then you went to the fight.
Yeah, I wonder how many of those folks there actually really, really follow boxing or care about it. And I'm not trying to gatekeep the sport or anything, or gatekeep fandom. I'm not like, you're not a real fan. I'm just generally saying, like, this is a major event, something cool. You're on TV, you know, you got set up by the promotional company, but you know, how much were you really, really invested in the fight?
It was more than a fight. It was one of the few boxing events that actually became more than boxing. It is this is a regular event. This is not a boxing match. This is a regular current event. So you get all types of people who are there for different reasons, not necessarily boxing fans. Hell, there's people who've probably only seen two Terrence Crawford fights there. You know what I mean? I'll just be honest with you. A lot of people haven't, outside the Spence fight, a lot of people who haven't seen Bud fight a lot of fights. Not like us. Like, I've seen Bud fight 20, 30 fights at minimum. So it's one of those things where we are different because we love boxing. Most people are there to get their picture taken, to get a free room, free tickets to the fight, and enjoy Vegas for a weekend.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people that do that for other things. I mean, I don't know if celebrity can get into like a Taylor Swift show, let's say in Vegas or New York, you know, for the same reason.
Super Bowl, same thing. Super Bowl, same thing. Final Four, same thing. This is how it goes. Like, and again, this fight was different. This was not a regular boxing match. This was an event. This was the first boxing match in Allegiant Stadium. This was a different event. And again, I don't think it will happen, but I am not opposed to a rematch if they decide to do it again. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would not mind them running it back.
The more time we spend away from the fight, the more I also think it will not happen. Yeah, I was on the record last episode saying I really, really wanted it, but I'm kind of just getting myself into the mindset of, well, you'll probably enjoy the moment for what it was, and we won't have it again. But yeah, you know, getting back to the movie, it was super cool, I think, to see the whole story take place around something that I love. You know, it took place around. I'm sure it's like, you know, I don't know if there's a movie around, you know, an action movie takes place at Comic-Con. You know, there's a lot of people that are going to be like, yeah, this is my life. This is what I love. This kind of thing. So it's always nice to see your interest represented, and something that literally didn't have to be at a boxing match. You know, this story, like I said, assassination plot, conspiracy, political intrigue. It could have been anywhere.
No, again, big boxing nights were different, because also got to remember, not everybody had the funds for pay-per-view back in the day either. Spending $50 for a pay-per-view fight back in the 90s, that was for everybody. That was not for nah, man. That was, you had to have, whoever had the fight either had illegal cable, or them people had money somehow, some way. It wasn't no, hey, let's get this. So the idea of a fight weekend in Vegas was very intriguing. It was really cool because all of us always heard that Vegas on a fight weekend is nothing better. It's the weekend, everything's cool, everybody's out there having fun, the fight, the after party, everything. So just with that being said, there's an image in your head that, hey, we gotta be there, we gotta be there. And everybody has that image. So yeah, no doubt. No doubt at all.
Yeah, that reminds me one funny thing that happened. The details don't matter, but Carla Gugino was supposed to drop off some secret documents to the Secretary of Defense, and they were communicating in secret. And she said, "Oh, the Secretary of Defense told me to just bring the documents to the fight." And I was like, "So he told you to just spend what $900, $800 to bring the documents? Like, you can't just do that. Meet me in the parking lot." Like, yeah, Carla Gugino dropped almost $1,000 to meet me at this fight. That was one of those things where I'm like, knowing what we know about boxing, I was going to ignore that, but that's, I'm sure there's a lot of movies that are about baseball, that are about football, that big fans that they just know they're just kind of totally ridiculous and unrealistic. But anyway, I mean, we're not really talking much about the movie itself, but whatever. I think, like I said, it'd make a fun conversation about boxing in its heyday, and a time that it's never going to be like that again. And I hate to be the old man of, back in my day, they don't make them like they used to, but literally the sport is not like it was in so many ways from when we were kids.
It can get there though. It can. I don't know if it will. It can get there. The reason why I say that is we have a lot of boxers. Like, we have a lot of actual boxers, but we got to get to knowing who they are. We have to actually market them, and they got to fight way more than they have been over the last 10, 15 years. We can get back to where we have a lot of fighters that are popular and famous, but you can't fight once every 13 months talking about, oh, I want $10 million for no.
Well, can't fight once every 13 months and need more access. Again, we're still sitting here twiddling our damn thumbs, figuring out where Top Rank is going to be.
Yes.
The Naoya Inoue fight that they had a couple weekends ago, that one was in the middle of the night because it was in Tokyo. So I've caught up on it on YouTube anyway, which is fine. Like, that's a fight that I wouldn't have been able to watch unless I stayed up till 3:30 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whatever. But what about the Saturday night fights? Are that going to be live on YouTube?
We need Saturday night fights. We need, honestly, I've been harping this for a long time, and this is from somebody that used to work in boxing that told me. He was like, every summer that goes by where they don't flood the TV with boxing is a wasted summer. He was like, summer is the downtime of all sports. There's a lot of TV windows open. They should be flooding every weekend with boxing. UFC does it. UFC has so many events over the summer. And I'm not a UFC guy. I don't hate it. It's just not for me like that, but I appreciate what they do. Like, they put their bodies on the line, they do what they do. They get it. Boxing, for whatever reason, still is having a hard time understanding what makes sense. And until they figure that out, we're going to keep on stubbing our toe.
Sure. Well, at least we'll have movies like Snake Eyes that'll bring, that nostalgia back. And we're talking about the commentators that they had back then. One of them is the amazing Al Bernstein, who was a guest on our show a couple episodes back. Yeah, so check out episode 24 to listen to that. And amazing interview. We were also discussing the Canelo Crawford, but he talked a lot about the state of boxing today and the future of it. So that one is also very timely. Awesome guy, awesome interviewee, just a legend. So we were lucky to have him. Snake Eyes, directed by Brian De Palma, one of the greats. If somebody wants to call him the GOAT, I might not argue. There's a lot of great movies. How would you rate this film out of 4 gloves, Jamieson?
It was like a 2.75.
I appreciate that. No, I was thinking 2.5, but just so I don't have to adjust the graphics on the scores, I'm gonna go 2.75 as well.
Yeah, it's all nice.
So I don't have to. Yeah. No, it was fun. You know what? Like I said, I didn't remember a lot about it. I don't remember if I liked it or not. I feel like I appreciated it more than I did as a kid for a lot of reasons. Definitely, it's one of those flicks that, like, I think it's not Brian De Palma's best by any means. But it holds up. It holds the test of time. If it's on sale from Kino Lorber Classics, you could pick up the 4K or the Blu-ray. I'm a physical media guy, so if you watch us on YouTube, you'll see the beautiful artwork on this.
Right.
So yeah, shout out to Brian De Palma, one of the greats. So everybody, thanks for listening. Jamieson, where can people find you on social media?
On Twitter at the Jamieson. Be on there for next fight night in October, I think. And then we will go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. October. Boots is coming back in October, and David Benavidez in November. So pretty good year for boxing. Latter half, I think. It's picking up after the summer. So we'll see how these fights go. You can follow the show on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Twitter at Mixed Co Podcast. Subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music, and leave us a 5-star review, please. We work hard here on the show for you. It only takes a minute. Now, watch us on YouTube. You can find the show notes, find the link in the show notes, or find us on the 19 Media Group channel. We have our own playlist there. We have an official show email address. If you have any questions for the mailbag, fun or crazy stories about watching boxing in mixed company, like the Mayweather Hatton fight, send it all to letters@mixedcopodcast.com. And don't forget, we drop new episodes every other Thursday. So join us next time for Mas Fuego from the boxing world. Thank you so much for listening, and salud.
Salute.